Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. In India, over 78,000 people have tested positive overnight, taking the caseload to over 3.7 million, with more than 66,000 deaths. Brazil has registered more than 1,200 deaths and over 42,000 cases in a day, with the infections tally approaching 4 million. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 18 people have lost their lives to the virus, raising the death toll to 6,318. Globally, the virus has claimed over 855,000 lives, while infecting over 25.6 million. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and senior White House advisor Jared Kushner have stressed the need to resume Palestine-Israel talks. Saudi state media said both sides also discussed the regional peace at a meeting in Riyadh. Kushner is on a pan-regional visit after the diplomatic normalization agreements between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Turkey says the U.S. decision to lift a 33-year-old arms embargo from Greek Cypriots has poisoned hopes for peace in the eastern Mediterranean. In a statement, Turkey's foreign ministry said this move is incompatible with the spirit of alliance. It said the decision should be reviewed, otherwise Ankara will take the necessary reciprocal steps. In Japan, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga has formally announced his candidacy as leader of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. Suga will be competing against former Defense Minister Shigeru Ishiba and Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida for the post. After an official party vote on September 14th, the new leader will need parliamentary majority to be the Prime Minister by September 16th. 10 people, including women and children, have died in rain-related incidents in Pakistan's northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Authorities say at least 20 others were injured during the last 24 hours in the districts of Swat, Mansehra and Shangla. Current monsoon season has claimed 176 lives across the country so far. News coming in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We start from India, where 1,045 people have died, while over 78,000 people have tested positive in the last 24 hours. Brazil has also registered more than 1,200 deaths and over 42,000 cases in a day. Globally, the virus has claimed over 855,000 lives, while infecting over 25.6 million. More in this report.
India continues to be the most festering COVID-19 hotspot of the world, with a daily tally of over 66,000, while caseload exceeding 3.7 million. In the Americas, the U.S. has announced it will not join the World Health Organization-led global push for a coronavirus vaccine. Meanwhile, in Mexico, the cases tally tops 600,000 as the country eases restrictions.
The epidemic is not over. In the area you live in, you'll still be able to hear stories and experiences about new cases, but that does not mean the epidemic in general does not exist, and we'll need to start reopening public life as the risk starts decreasing.
In Asia, mainland China has reported 8 new imported cases, down from 10 a day earlier. South Korea has reported 267 new infections as cases remain under 300 for the 4th day straight. Meanwhile, Australia has been pushed into recession, bringing 3 decades of economic growth to a halt. The government is considering to ease restrictions in the Victoria state after a hint of a downward trend in new cases.
First things first, there are 19,224 confirmed aggregate cases of coronavirus across the state since, of course, the beginning of the pandemic. That's 90 new cases since our update yesterday. Sadly, there have been now 576 Victorians who have lost their life because of this global pandemic. That's an increase of 6 since yesterday's report.
For Europe, the WHO says the region can live without a vaccine by managing outbreaks with localized lockdowns. Millions of students around Europe return to school with mandatory masks and social distancing.
Meanwhile, in Pakistan, 18 people have lost their lives to the virus in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the death toll has reached 6,318 so far. The ministry said 441 more tested positive for the disease overnight. It said the number of active cases in the country is at 8,813. More than 280,000 patients out of some 296,000 have recovered, which accounts for a 95% recovery rate in the country. Sindh remains the most affected province with nearly 129,000 infections, while Punjab has reported close to 97,000 cases so far. Now, Pakistan has condemned a decision by the French magazine Charlie Hebdo to republish blasphemous caricatures of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. In a tweet, the Foreign Office said such a move to offend billions of Muslims cannot be justified under the pretext of freedom of expression. It added, actions undermine global aspirations for peaceful coexistence and interfaith harmony. Moving on, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and senior White House advisor Jared Kushner have stressed the need to resume Palestine-Israel talks. Saudi state media said both sides also discussed the regional peace at a meeting in Riyadh. Kushner is on a pan-regional visit after the diplomatic normalization agreement between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. Meanwhile, Washington, Abu Dhabi and Tel Aviv have urged the Palestinians to re-engage in peace talks. Earlier, Abu Dhabi reiterated its commitment to a sovereign Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Now, Turkey says the U.S. decision to lift a 33-year-old arms embargo from Greek Cypriots has poisoned hopes for peace in the eastern Mediterranean. In a statement, Turkey's foreign ministry said this move is incompatible with the spirit of alliance. It said the decision should be reviewed, otherwise Ankara will take the necessary reciprocal steps. The statement said the move disregards the equality and the balance on the island. Turkey has also rejected Austrian claims alleging Ankara of espionage as baseless. The ministry said Austria's comments show Vienna was unable to escape populist rhetoric and anti-Turkey obsession. Niger, the UN Security Council's president for September, has dismissed the US bid to trigger the return of UN sanctions on Iran. Niger ruled out any move to put forward the SNAPBACK draft resolution, citing the lack of consensus in the 15-member body. The UNSC president said the US or any other member state of the Security Council can submit such a proposal if they want. Last month, Indonesia UNSC president for August said it could not act upon the US measure due to the opposition of 13 council members. Meanwhile, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo tweeted Washington will veto any resolution against the SNAPBACK measure. Elsewhere, Iranian government spokesperson Ali Rabiei slammed Washington's bullying and interference into the Iranian nuclear issue.
Iran hopes all parties concerned could strongly support fulfillment of the deal and object to the series of illegal bullying actions of the US together.
Earlier last month, Washington formally notified the UN of its demand to restore sanctions on Tehran. Now, moving on, the remaining signatories to the Iran nuclear deal have rejected an attempt by the US to trigger a return of UN sanctions on Iran. In a statement, Washington had withdrawn from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2018 and hence cannot initiate the curbs. It said all participants of the meeting agreed to save the faltering agreement. The statement said the Joint Commission addressed nuclear as well as sanctions lifting issues under the agreement. It also welcomed the implementation of a joint statement of Iran and the International Atomic Energy Agency. Regarding the US decision to end the Iraq waiver, the statement said all participants reiterated their strong support and collective responsibility for the continuation of the project. Meanwhile, the Tunisian parliament has approved the government of Prime Minister-designate Hichem Mechichi. In a vote of confidence, 134 legislators voted in favour and 67 against the government. On July 26, President Kais Saied assigned the then Interior Minister Mechichi to form a new government. Mechichi formed a technocratic government with 25 ministers and 3 state clerks. His cabinet will take an oath in front of President Saied this week. Meanwhile, the European Union has welcomed the Libyan ceasefire, saying Brussels continues to support a political resolution to the conflict. This comes as EU's foreign policy chiefs Joseph Borrell held talks with Libya's internationally recognized Prime Minister Faiz al-Sarraj in Tripoli. Borrell said the two sides discussed ways forward and to advance the political process to return to the UN-backed military committee talks and to lift oil blockade. The EU's diplomat said Brussels strongly supports mediation efforts, de-escalation measures, including an arms embargo. Meanwhile, Italian Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio also met with both Libyan parties. The foreign minister called Libya a crucial crossroads for building a new model of development in the Mediterranean. Turkey says it has seized huge ammunition belonging to the Kurdistan Workers' Party in an operation in southeastern Hakkari province. In a statement, officials of the Hakkari Governorate said security forces have seized 2,600 rounds of anti-aircraft munition. The official said forces carried out Operation Yildirim 2 Selo in Semdilne district of the province. Turkey has launched a series of security operations to neutralize terrorists believed to be hiding out in the country's east and southeast. Turkey holds the PKK responsible for the deaths of some 40,000 people in its 30-year conflict. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back now. Moving on with the news stories. In Japan, Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga has formally announced his candidacy as leader of the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. The announced candidacy puts him in line to succeed Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Yoshihide Suga has worked as Prime Minister Abe's right-hand man for 8 years and has now emerged as frontrunner in the upcoming September 14th elections. Suga will be competing against former Defense Minister Shigeru Ishiba and ex-Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida for the post. The process to elect the LDP's president will begin on September 8th with an official vote on the 14th of September. The new leader will have to gain majority support in the parliament to be elected as the Prime Minister by September 16th. Earlier, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe stepped down because of health reasons. Turkey says two Venezuelan opposition leaders are in talks with the government of President Nicolas Maduro to participate in the upcoming legislative elections. After talks with Maduro and the opposition leaders, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu at a news conference said both sides have agreed on the presence of international observers in the vote scheduled for December. Cavusoglu said Ankara is happy the two sides are close to a deal and that foreign-funded individuals will not take part in the elections. President Nicolas Maduro has also pardoned over 100 opposition politicians ahead of the elections and asked the people to trust his decision.
Understand me. I ask for your understanding. I know what I am doing. I ask for your support. I ask for the understanding of all of Venezuela. I ask for your understanding and ask for your support on this path to peace. I know what I am doing.
Now, Turkey says for a sustainable and permanent ceasefire in Libya, the northern city of Sirte and central region of Jafra will have to be demilitarized. Turkey's Deputy Foreign Minister Sedat Önal gave this statement following his visit to Russia. Önal said Turkey has declared its support for demilitarization during meetings with the Russian officials. He said Turkey has also stressed the importance of starting the UN-backed intra-Libyan political dialogue and implementing the Berlin Conference resolutions. Önal also said Russia and Turkey have decided to maintain contact towards political resolution in Libya. Moving on, Russia has accused Lithuania and Belarusian opposition leader of not respecting the Minsk sovereignty. Speaking in Moscow, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Lithuania and Sviatlana Shinashkoskaya are employing undemocratic methods. Opposition figures Shinashkoskaya fled to Lithuania after the country's controversial presidential elections. She is releasing videos from Lithuania calling for protests against the re-election of Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko. Lavrov said the Belarusian president has suggested reforming the constitution to calm the civil society.
Our Lithuanian neighbors, in my opinion, have crossed all lines of decency in the demands they're putting forward. We have reason to believe that they, along with Belarusian opposition politicians, are using not completely democratic methods, which don't exactly respect the sovereignty of the Republic of Belarus.
Meanwhile, the US has expressed concern over China's nuclear ambition, saying Beijing is set to at least double its warheads over the next decade. In an annual report to the Congress, Pentagon said Beijing is close to achieving the triad, the ability to launch nuclear strikes by land, air and sea. The Pentagon said Beijing's current warheads count is in the low 200s, but it has enough material to double it without a new fossil material production. The report said China also has the world's largest navy with 350 ships and submarines, including over 130 major surface combatants. This comes as Washington tries to include Beijing in talks to extend the nuclear arms treaty between the US and Russia. Beijing has conditioned its participation with the US reducing its nuclear arsenal to China's stockpile. In the US state of California, fresh protests have broken out in Los Angeles after police shot dead another African-American, Dijon Kizzy. Earlier last week, Pasadena police in the county fatally shot a black man, Anthony McLean, triggering BLM demonstrations.
The county sheriff department said Kinsey ran away when deputy officers tried to stop him from violating unspecified vehicle codes. The sheriff said when reached by the officers, Kinsey punched a cop and dropped a pistol on the ground. However, eyewitnesses claim Kinsey did not have a gun and was not a threat. The deputy shot the man over 20 times, which Kinsey's aunt said was due to her nephew's appearance as a black man. This comes as President Donald Trump reaches Kenosha in Wisconsin and backs police officers, saying they sometimes have to choke people.
We have to condemn the dangerous anti-police rhetoric. It's getting more and more. It's very unfair. You have some bad apples, we all know that, and those will be taken care of through the system, and nobody's going to be easy on them either. And you have people that choke.
After Portland, Kenosha has also become protests hotspot since police shot African-American Jacob Blake multiple times in the back, leaving him paralyzed.
Facebook and Twitter have taken down accounts allegedly linked to Russian state actors for committing coordinated inauthentic behavior. The company says 13 accounts and 2 pages tied to Russia's Internet Research Agency have been removed from the social network. The U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation says it provided the information to Facebook against threats to security and democracy. Facebook said a Russian influence operation posed as an independent news outlet to target left-wing voters in the US and the UK. It said the outlet recruited freelance journalists to write about the US and Britain's domestic politics. Meanwhile, Twitter says it has also suspended 5 related accounts attributed to Russian actors for platform manipulation. Now 10 people, including women and children, have died in rain-related incidents in Pakistan's northwestern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. Authorities say at least 20 others were injured during the last 24 hours in the districts of Swat, Mansehra and Shangla. Current monsoon season has claimed 176 lives across the country so far. The National Disaster Management Authority says 101 others have been injured, while over 200 houses have been damaged. The life-size Nourishing Our Future sculpture, entirely made by butter, is put on display in New York City. The sculpture was presented via Facebook Live due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The buttery artwork has 2 timely panels, One side shows parents serving their kids food with butter, while the other shows a laptop in place for distance learning in the era of global pandemic. The sculpture is part of the annual New York State Fair, which is organized by the American Dairy Association. Much of the rest of the fair has been sidelined as a result of the pandemic. Now, European stocks are trading higher on the back of a strong session on Wall Street despite troubling economic indicators in the region. Investors also await Eurozone's central bank's updated inflation estimates for September. European stock 600 is trading around 1.5% higher. Frankfurt's DAX is trading close to 2% higher. London's FTSE 100 has gained 1.5%. CAC 40 in Paris has so far climbed a little over 1%. Earlier, Asian markets traded mixed, with mainland Chinese stocks trading marginally lower. The International Air Transport Association says passenger demand has slightly improved in July compared to the last month. In a press release, the association said the drop in the demand was 96.8% in June, while reducing to 91.9% in July. It said reopening aviation market in the Shenzhen area contributed to the international demand in Europe. It said domestic traffic fell 57.5% in July, less than 68% decline in June. IATA said lifting and reimposing quarantine measures do not give customers confidence to make travel plans for nor airlines to make schedules. Now, the latest data from the Australian government shows the country has fallen into its deepest economic slump on record in the second quarter. The stats show the country's $1.47 trillion economy shrunk by 7% in the second quarter, continuing the first quarter decline. Canberra has reported its first downturn since 1991 and joined the United States, Japan and the United Kingdom and Germany. Addressing media, Treasurer George Frydenberg said this crisis is like no other and attributed the downturn to the COVID-19 pandemic. He said the government will keep its policy of maintaining fiscal stimulus and support its people as the country comes out of the crisis. Frydenberg said the victorious lockdowns will weigh heavily on September quarter GDP. The June quarter decline is the largest in quarterly gross domestic product since records began in 1959. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that's all for now. For the latest update, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.